Hi there, this is Sean with a book review. In this video, it's full steam ahead as we continue our journey in the Railway Detective series. This is book 3, it's called The Railway Viaduct. The plot is still complex in this novel. It's not as good as book 2 in the series, which I thought was a shame because as the series progresses, you would hope that each book would be as good or just that little bit better than the previous book. But like book 2, this novel takes us to different settings, so it adds a bit of excitement and a bit of fun to the story. In this novel we go to France, Liverpool, and a small area called Limestone. I think Limestone's still in the London area, but I found that a little bit fascinating with Limestone because we get a little bit of history of why it's called that. The reason we go to France is because the murder victim, is French. He's thrown from a train that's crossing a viaduct, hence the title of the book. What I found interesting and, it was a little bit fun about the murder is the witnesses. We have a few witnesses, some scamper away because they don't want to be caught up in a murder scene. One's an artist and he's at the scene of the crime basically because he's wanting to paint the viaduct. He's looking for inspiration and he gets inspiration in the falling body that's thrown from the train. That was a little bit of a quirky element into the story, especially when the artist turns up a bit later on in the book, presenting his painting to the police saying, here's what happened in the scene. I thought that was quite fun and quite unique. There are 3 other witnesses to the crime who fished the body out of the water. They're a bit fun as well, just because they take the opportunity to steal clothes from the victim, as you probably would in 1850s England if you were short of clothes yourself. When our heroes go to France, they don't go to, the amazing city or, a really beautiful setting. They're going to a work site because the French are asking English companies to build railways for them. So in this novel we get a bit of tension between the French and the English because it's about 40 years or so after the war between the 2 countries. So there's still a bit of tension and mistrust with some people. And this is propelled through the laying of the railways in France because the companies are building the railways to head to munition depots. And some of the English think that the French will use that railway then to invade England. So that's also an interesting element in this novel, adds a bit of history as well. While I did think the novel was complex and the mystery element was quite good, I didn't like the fact that we learn who the culprits are around 2/3 or so of the way through the novel. I prefer novels that we find out the culprit more towards the end. And we did so in book 2. Even though this time we find out a bit earlier on for my own liking, I think it suited this novel well because we then get to see the heroes catch up a bit, and it's not spoiling what the heroes are doing in that part of the novel so much, but it does taint it a little bit. As I said before, it's the characters and their relationships that form the bigger part of a cozy mystery story. In this novel, Superintendent Tallis plays a bigger role, bigger than he has in books 1 and 2. Now I'm starting to like his character a bit. Before, when I thought he was a bit annoying and he was just going to keep playing that, part of the villain on the good side, putting the brakes on the investigation, which he still did a bit in this novel. I get the feeling that he secretly does think Colbeck is a good investigator, and while he wants to show this stern authority figure to people who are underneath him in the force, he wants the best for the force and the best for his investigators, and he wants criminals caught as quickly as possible. He has other good elements as well in this story where he shows a bit of a caring side for Victor Leeming when he gets in a bit of trouble. And so I'm seeing different sides to Tallis now, and I'm finding that fascinating, and that character is developing really well. Sergeant Victor Leeming, now he's the highlight for me of this series, but I'm not sure the author is doing him any justice because in this book, the same thing that happens to him in book 2 happens in this book. I'm not a fan of that repetition, especially in this aspect. Again, we see Li Ming asked to go undercover a bit to investigate and find out some information from people they suspect of doing wrong. In both cases, he asks too many questions too quickly, so people get suspicious of him. And in both novels, novel 2 and this novel, he's knocked out and beaten up. So that's a bit repetitive, and I find that a bit lazy. And I've read so many series where people in the series always get injured, always go into dangerous situations. When that happens too often, you just lose sympathy for the character. The only difference was that in this novel, he's put on sick leave after his injuries, where in novel 2, he continued on with the case. So that was the only difference. That allowed one of the side characters, and one of my favourite side characters, Brendan Mulreen, to appear in this novel. He was in novel 1, and he played, a bit of a larrikin, lout kind of role in novel 1, and he did so in this novel as well. But he's a really fun character because he goes about things in his own way, which is definitely not the right way of doing things, and nobody thinks it's the right way, but he gets results. And his character just stands out so much, and I do hope that Brendan Mulreen does appear in future novels. I'm not sure how that will happen, and I'm hoping it won't be repetitive like we've seen with Li Ming, but I do want to see more of that character in this series. We can't finish a discussion on a book in this series without talking about the Colbeck-Madeline situation. Will they, won't they? Are they friends or more? In books 1 and 2, it was on again, off again, quite often. And we had cliffhangers at the end of book 1 and book 2. And that reminded me of TV series where you get this storyline stringing the viewer along from week to week, oftentimes through a whole series. What we see in book 3 is quite early on, they are more than friends. How much more? I'm not really sure, but they're definitely more than friends. What else we see is that Caleb, Madeline's father, is all for them getting married as quickly as possible. He is so enamoured with Colbeck himself. The main reason for that is that Colbeck has an interest in trains and engines. What we also see with Caleb, that carried on from novel 2, is that he keeps following the cases that Colbeck's on. And every time he reads an article, of course, he thinks he knows what Colbeck should focus on. He's also quite annoyed because when he finds out that the murder happened on the train going across the viaduct, it's a train line that he's driven, and it's for a train company that he works for. So he thinks that Colbeck should have come and spoken to him straight away. He would have had valuable clues even though he wasn't at the scene of the crime. That just adds that fun, quirky element to this story that we need in cozy mysteries. I so wanted this novel to be as good or better than book 2. It wasn't. It's that mystery element. It was still complex, but because we found out the culprits too early on for my liking, it wasn't as good as book 2. I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. The characters are still really good, although we're seeing some repetition creep in, and I hope that doesn't continue, because if it does continue too often, I don't know that I can keep on reading this series, although I really want to, because that history element and that element, about the trains as well is really interesting, and I'm learning new things as I read these novels, and I want to continue on with the series because I want to see what happens between Madeline and Colbeck as well. I also want to see if Li Ming gets a promotion, or what happens with Tallis. Does he suddenly become nice all the time? It's those little things that I want to see in this series, and I hope that there's enough interest to keep me reading.